Good morning, gearheads. Welcome to Speed City F1. We are just finishing up watching the qualifying session in Hungary at Hungaroring, where Mamma Mia, Charles Leclerc is on the pole, the first pole for Ferrari. Wow, this is Jon Massengale. I'm joined by Bob Varsha. Jonathan Green's not going to be with us today, but Chris Medland will be joining us from the Hungaroring here shortly. Bob Varsha, how about that, Charles Leclerc on pole?
I was kind of looking away, doing something else, making notes, whatever. And all of a sudden I look up and Leclerc is on provisional pole. Where's everybody else on their laps? Nobody's going to get him. That was amazing. What a lap from Leclerc, and it puts Lewis Hamilton's poor qualifying in perspective. He seemed entirely heartbroken. But, bravo, Leclerc. What a great job he did. And look what it means about where Ferrari has come thus far in light of Fred Vasseur's new contract and yada, yada, yada. Big news in Italy.
Yeah, and you weren't the only one surprised. Did you hear Charles Leclerc himself? He was like, what? When they told him he was P1, followed by the Mamma Mia. That's what I was referring to. But
yeah,
I think everybody was surprised. Yeah, that's fantastic for Ferrari. And what a nice present for Fred Vasseur with his new contract and a pole position.
Yep. And, I think it's fair to say that Lewis has been a better racer than a qualifier this year in the Ferrari. So there may be more good news for Maranello if, Leclerc can lead from the front, maybe pick up a win, and Lewis can gain some positions. I mean, obviously the Constructors' Championship is out of sight. Basically, McLaren has doubled up on Ferrari's points, but still, it would be great to see Ferrari come through. They said 80% of the crowd in Hungary is from outside the country, and I bet 80% of that 80% are all Ferrari fans. So this could be big news.
You're not asking me to do math right now live on the air, are you, Bob? Well, hey, I hear Chris Medland's microphone lighting up. Mr. Medland, how are you, buddy?
I'm okay, thanks, chaps. I've just got myself out into this brand new paddock here at Hungaroring, which is still get my bearings around this place. They've done a hell of a job turning it around in the past year to make it look very different to 12 months ago.
Yeah. Look, I want to hear all about it, Chris, because it looks amazing. I've been watching the construction and everything, and it on television. It looks incredible.
Yeah, it's a completely modern facility now that they just had nothing like this 12 months ago. And they knocked down the old pit and paddock building, knocked down the main grandstand within a few days of the Grand Prix ending last year, and then have completely rebuilt it. They've extended the paddock out towards was actually the second corner and the penultimate corner. So now it's kind of raised over some lower levels, so there's more space for all the motorhomes and trucks. And then this lovely 3-story glass modern building that they built, which still is unfinished in places, but it's finished enough for us to go racing this weekend in I'd say a much better working environment for the teams. Bigger garages, much more comfortable, much more modern.
Yeah, I heard that this construction started on the Wednesday after last year's Grand Prix and then lasted the entire year, and they just finished up, and it was like one of the biggest construction projects in the entire country.
Oh, yeah. It's a totally transformed the place. When I first went there in 1986, its first race, you got to the track by driving down the highway, turning into a service area, driving around the back, going up a dirt road, bounding through the trees, and you came on this rise, and there was this piece of pavement in front of you. So you waited and you got up into a paddock that couldn't stand a comparison with your average high school football game tailgate. And the interesting thing about the track was that the track only owned where there was pavement and paddock. Some woman owned the interior of the track, and she would not sell. And so I remember looking out there, and all of the Formula One photography crew were slogging through this tall grass. They couldn't cut across the infield, so they had to go all the way around. And to see what they've done now, they've obviously acquired land. They've built enormous grandstands. The paddock club is great. The garages look great. I want to go back because this is so different from what it was back in the 80s.
Yeah, that woman and her family are now watching from their chalet in Monaco.
No doubt. Oh, we were still under, the communists at the time. There were still, bullet marks in the downtown buildings. It was only about 10 years, no, 3 decades after the Hungarian Revolution in the 50s. And we couldn't fly a helicopter over the tracks. You had no aerial shots. It was just one restriction after another. And now it just looks like a joy to go to that track and see what they've done.
Well, Chris, I want to have to get your eyes and ears, but first to get your impressions. First pole for Ferrari for 2025, more than halfway through the season. Wow.
Yeah, I think if you'd have told me that would have been the case at the start of the season, I wouldn't have believed it. I'd have expected it to come much earlier. But then when we get to this point of the year as well, I wasn't expecting it this weekend. It's been a good weekend for Leclerc. Let's not forget that. He's been competitive throughout every session, but not competitive enough that you thought he was going to go beating McLaren's in Q3. So, that one caught a lot of people out. I've actually joined the scrum of media behind the Ferrari garage to see if we can get a word with Fred Vasseur at some point on his thoughts. But as you can imagine, he's got a bit of a wry smile on his face. He's happy with today's work, at least on the Leclerc side of the garage. It must be a bit bittersweet because Lewis Hamilton dropping out in Q2 shows how close it is. That was a few thousandths of a second, and you don't make Q3 and you don't have a chance to fight for pole.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about his teammate, Lewis Hamilton. Wow. And not making through to Q3 and really not even close, Bob. I mean, where was he? 13th? 12th?
Yeah, he was buried in the 5 cars that were eliminated. And there was video of him walking away. He did sign some autographs for some kids, which I was glad to see because
with his helmet on.
When he walked away from the car, he had his helmet on. And I think he was mimicking wiping his visor, but I think what he was doing was just hiding his eyes from what people could see. He seemed just crushed.
Yeah, I saw that. That was they showed that whole scene for several seconds, and like you said, he came out and signed a hat there, but he kept his helmet on and was not obviously not happy with that. I mean, I know that he had to be so excited for upgrades that they've had, and the fresh contract for Vasseur has got to buoy the whole team. But man,
and Lewis is now giving written reports to the team about this is what was good, this is what was bad, here's what I think we ought to do. He is still fully engaged. There's no sulking, no diva-like activities. He's playing the team game.
Well, and if you go back to what Leclerc said right afterward, the session when he was in the interview, he was saying it was incredibly difficult. And he said very, very difficult, the entire qualifying in that session. And clearly he was surprised. So, yeah, the car was, I think it just was an amazing lap put together by Leclerc. And, maybe possibly there's even some wind gusts because I saw Russell complaining about wind gusts. Chris, did you hear
a little rain
on Hamilton's lap?
So I don't know about Lewis's lap, but when it came to Q3, that was definitely the case. It changed, the track temperature dropped, but it was very gusty then, and the drivers were really fighting with instability in the wind, and that's nothing they've faced this weekend so far. So that was new for them. I just wanted to pick up, actually. You were right originally, because Kimi Antonelli had his lap time deleted, but Lewis was 13th in Q2 before that lap time deletion. But he was 15 thousandths of a second away from getting through. So Bortoletto, then it was Antonelli, Behrman, and Hamilton were all covered by 15 thousandths of a second. That shows you how competitive it is. And the tiniest margin can make a difference. Now, Bortoletto, as I say, just snuck through and then put it 7th ahead of Verstappen and the 2 Racing Bulls. So it's only when you get through that you have that chance. And I think we saw Ferrari deal very well with the higher wind gusts and the change in wind direction compared to rivals and certainly compared to McLaren. And that's something that, it's not to say that the gap is 1st to 12th today between Hamilton and Leclerc, because Hamilton didn't get into Q3 to have a shot at that. But it showed that Leclerc adapted very well in those conditions. Hamilton might well have too. He could have been right up there if he got through. But that's the challenge of F1 these days when it's so close that you're not guaranteed to make it to that point of the qualifying session.
Yeah, that's crazy that it was that close. But look, we got some good news to talk about for lots of drivers, including Fernando Alonso, who turned 44 on Tuesday. And what a session he had, Bob, and ended up at P5 in qualifying.
What a guy. I don't know, what the team might have done to improve the car. So all credit to them if that's the case. But both Alonso and Stroll were just on fire in these sessions. At one point, they were second and fourth, and now they're at fifth and sixth on the grid. That is fabulous for this team that couldn't hit its butt with both hands at the beginning of the season.
Yeah. Hey, Chris. So, yeah, we saw this. Was there some optimism in the garage at Aston Martin this weekend?
I think there was after yesterday. They hit the ground running yesterday. Carbs in a good place. Balance was decent. Oh, obviously, yeah, Alonso didn't even take part in FP1 with a back issue and then could get straight in and be quick in FP2 alongside Stroll, who was quick throughout. And I think they just felt that they had the right setup, had the right components on the car. And in that sense, they hit the ground running and they were ready to go. So it was very impressive that they got it right straight off the bat. And I'm just hovering now to find out what's going to happen with Fred Vasseur. I don't think I'm top of the list here, but we'll see if we get a word with him in a second. And I tell you, I will go down to Aston Martin and get the thoughts of hopefully Mike Crack, who should be around. He's kind of acting team principal this weekend because Andy Cowell's not here. But Crack obviously was the team principal at Aston Martin before the season anyway, so that's a role that he has fulfilled. I was not next in the queue, I can tell you that. So I'm still hovering at Ferrari.
Well, just jump in, but talking about the back issue with Fernando Alonso, it was made a huge deal of it early on Friday. But really, I wasn't that surprised. And we've seen this kind of thing in the NFL, Bob, and other sports where you've got an older player, especially an amazing one like that they'll keep him out of a preseason game, or they'll take him out if they're running up the score. So that kind of thing. It didn't surprise me really.
No, it's not a surprise. But if I were Alonso's engineer, I'd show up with a big stick at every race now and just let him know that, if you need a little pain in the back to get your adrenaline flowing and get you out there. Plus, credit experience too. Alonso has driven so many races at this track in his 44 years. It's a track that calls for momentum and precision. And, I'm sure Alonso knows this track as well as, if not better than anybody. So maybe it's not such a surprise that with a good handling car, he can have a big impact.
Well, I for a minute there, I saw someone doing the math on Alonso on his last pole. It's been 4,700 days since his last pole or something like that. So,
yeah. Alonso we're talking about?
Yeah.
I think it was 2012 was his last pole.
Yeah. Chris, you still waiting on Fred Vasseur?
Yes, but it might be quite a wait, I will admit. As you can imagine, they are a team in demand with this one, getting the surprise pole position.
Sure.
So there's quite the queue, and people are coming and going, trying to work out when they get to him. But he's currently with French television, which is obviously a comfortable place for Fred, speaking his own language. So I'll have to do my typical interrupting. So the more Bob talks, basically, the more chance we have of getting him.
Yeah, that's true. There's a much better chance of you, wise guy. Let's talk about something else in the meantime. Vasseur's contract is great. The results of qualifying were great. How about Verstappen, plighting his troth with Red Bull again, at least for 2026? And what does that do to the dynamic up and down the pit lane? I'm thinking particularly of George Russell at Mercedes now. So, he can walk by Toto Wolff and give him a long stare every time he goes to get in the car now, because he definitely has the leverage in his discussions about a new contract with Mercedes.
Yeah, for sure. I was thinking about when you talk about Russell's, did you see the lap, not his last lap, but before that, where he had two purple sectors and he lost it on the last corner, lost the rear of the car on the last corner. Had he not done that, you think about Leclerc's lap in comparison, he could have had the same kind of lap. You never know. I'm sure the track was getting quicker as the session progressed, but he had a great lap going there too.
Yeah, so he could potentially have a great race, and that would be fine. And what about Kimi Antonelli? Obviously he has not had the best of rookie seasons, though he's in a fantastic car. So what do you do with him now? Does he need some seasoning somewhere else? Was he brought up too quickly? That's something else Toto Wolff has to think about, it seems to me.
Yeah. What do you think about that question, Chris?
Well, Mercedes are pretty pragmatic about this one, I will admit, that because they've been talking about how the car obviously was more competitive and more consistent at the start of the season. Something they were quite proud of was that they were consistently at the sharper end, even if they were still a step behind McLaren. And we saw Russell, didn't we? We almost said he was kind of in the title fight with lots of top 5 finishes all the way through the first part of the year. And then for Antonelli, the drop-off in form coincides with Mercedes being less competitive, the car getting tougher to drive. And the team says George can deal with that because he has experience. And not only experience, he's driven one of pretty tricky Mercedes cars, but also the Williams for a number of years. So he's got that kind of data bank to fall back on that Kimi doesn't in Formula One yet. So they said, you do see rookies struggle more in these scenarios. Our job is to give him a better car, more compliant car to show what he can do because he's already shown that. You look at Canada, great performance in Canada on the podium. You give them a competitive car, he'll do the job. So I don't think they'll be overly stressed by what they're saying from Antonelli in that sense. Weirdly, though, if they're going to be running at the front, say next year or the year after, that's when you do think, well, he needs to be already on it by then. He needs to have gone through this learning phase to be able to deliver when it really matters in terms of some of the potential opportunities that you'd get in a World Championship fight. So that's why I think there's been a bit of a question mark over his future if Max had been available, and still obviously could be in 27. But I think Mercedes aren't overly concerned. I think this is part of the teething pains you kind of expect to see from a rookie.
Yeah. I agree with you, Chris. I don't think it's any sort of panic mode or anything like that with Antonelli. Like you said, he looked good at the early part, but hey, I want to go back to the top 4 or 5 drivers here, because we said Leclerc's on pole, but Piastri only 2,600 of a second behind him. Norris only 1,500s behind Piastri, and Russell only 800s behind Norris. So those top 4 just literally a blink of an eye behind them, and really Alonso not that far back. About a half a tenth back from that. So really, like we've seen all season, just so tight across all the cars, Bob.
Yeah, no question. What was it last year? The top 3 cars, which was both McLaren's and Verstappen, were covered by something like 45 thousandths of a second. This track puts up those kinds of numbers and some surprise race winners. So this is going to be a good one to watch. I don't know what the long-term weather forecast is for tomorrow. Has anybody heard?
We've got rain in the morning, it looks like.
Rain in the morning. Oh, great. So the Formula 3 guys take it in the chin again, huh?
Oh, man. Hey, speaking of the lower formulas, we got to take a break. But when we come back, I want to talk about the incredible race that Jack Crawford had and an amazing battle he had with Arvid Lindblad. You're listening to Speed City. Back up to these messages. All right, live on YouTube. Joe of Oyster Bay is here. He says, that was fun, exclamation. Bill Ricker's here, and he agrees. TW, he's here. He said, pretty exciting. Expected more from the Mercs, from the Mercedes with the cooler temps. Yeah. Yep. Can't argue with that logic, TW. Let's see. Kevin Kelly's here. What you got, Chris?
I didn't say anything.
That was me. I was responding to that cooler temps comment. That's true, but you still need grip. And that seemed to be what everybody was struggling with out there, was the back of the car.
The back, yeah. Everybody with the back of the car.
Yeah.
And as you say, don't forget, George is on the second row. You've got top 4.
Yeah, it's true. Kevin Kelly says, I don't understand how Chuck did that. Sector 1, he has the 3rd best time. Sector 2 has the 4th best time. And Sector 3, he has the 8th best time. Wait, that math doesn't add up. You're right.
Well, I think it was that same thing. You lose the back end for the most minute space of time. And by the time you get back on the throttle, you've lost tenths of a second. And that's all it takes.
Joe follows up with, he was purple everywhere on that lap. So, yeah, man, it was... let's see. Kevin Kelly says, when the track first opened in 86, I think he said, I was excited to see the first F1 race behind the Iron Curtain. Huh. Cool.
That's the one I'm talking about.
Yeah. Let's see. Anybody else here? Oh, Paul Velton. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Paul. He says, thanks for the show, gentlemen. And TW says, like and subscribe. Anybody out there?
Please, my wife checks these numbers and she wants to see bigger ones.
There you go. We got to keep wives. All right, coming back.
I'm George Russell, and you're listening to Speed City.
Welcome back to the fastest hour in radio, Speed City.
All right, welcome back, everybody. When we went to break, I said I wanted to talk about American Jack Crawford, the Formula 2 driver, and I got to see the sprint race, and he had a fantastic battle with the young phenom that is Arvid Lindblad, and they were battling for the final podium position, and they battled for probably the last 8 laps, and on the final lap, coming out of a safety car, Jack Crawford showed the difference between the couple of years he has on Arvid Lindblad, because he had a brilliant strategic move and set up the pass he did about 2 corners back and ended up in just the right position to pass Arvid Lindblad. And very excited to see Jack on the podium. And we'll see how he ends up in the standings in Formula 2 after this weekend, because I believe, I haven't even looked, but I think, Chris, is this right? He was third going into the weekend?
Yeah, he was, and he remains there, but he's within 5 points of the championship lead now. You've got the top 4 drivers all covered by 5 points.
Wow.
So Leo Fornaroli is top. He got 2 points today in 7th. Richard Verschoor's up there too. He got a point in 8th. And then it's Jack as well with Alex Dunn, who was second in that race. But on top of all of that, it could still change, because both Dunn, who was second, and Pepe Marti, who won the race, both have post-race investigations ongoing for different incidents that neither of them would really talk about too much after the race, and they were both a bit surprised to be under investigation. I will admit, I'm not sure I saw either of them as a hugely problematic. It was to do with some of their fighting on the final lap, but also some yellow flag infringement potential, which again, from both sides, they were like, well, that seems odd. So we'll wait and see if that turns into anything. But if there are any penalties, then it'll be Jack picking up the pieces even more. So he could be picking up even more points after the race itself. But what I think is quite important to point out is that, yeah, it's tough to make progress here. It's tough to overtake. But he went from 8th to 3rd in the sprint race. He's starting 3rd again tomorrow. So he's in a really good spot to pick up big points in the Grand Prix itself.
Wow.
Or the feature race itself, should I say.
Yeah, well, yeah, and he could end up coming out of the weekend leading the championship with such a tight field like that. That'd be amazing for Jack.
Yeah, he actually said he really was targeting that going into this weekend to go into the little break, because they don't have a mandatory shutdown, but they're not going to be racing in Zandvoort. So the next race will be at Monza in early September. And he said he'd like to go through that period with the championship lead. And he did get asked actually in the press conference that I host the top 3 press conferences in F2 and F3. And he got asked, well, yeah, why is that your mindset? Do you prefer being the hunted rather than the hunter? And he said, no, to be honest, it's that I just do it based on simple maths. At the end of the season, for example, if the champion is going to have scored 200 points over the season, well, I'm closer to that 200 point mark if I'm in the lead than anyone else. So it's not about kind of the pressure of the situation. It's just the simple maths that I'd rather have those points already in the bag because they're fewer points that I need to score later in the year.
Oh, that's great. Hey, I want to run down and talk about some of the drivers we haven't talked about today. But let me just run down the top 10 if you didn't hear it all. So Leclerc on pole, followed by the 2 McLarens, Piastri and Norris, then George Russell, Alonso, Stroll right behind him, his teammate, and then Bortoleto in 7th. Verstappen ahead of the next Red Bull, not his teammate, but Liam Lawson right behind Verstappen. And I was watching that, and Hadjar right behind him. Yeah, and I was watching to see who was going to be the fastest Red Bull of all the Red Bull cars, all 4. I'm saying Red Bull and the Racing Bulls, because at one point it looked like that might not be the case, that Verstappen might not be the fastest of all of those. Bob, were you watching that yourself?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Seeing Lawson there and behind him, Isaac Hadjar. Yeah, I think there's a real chance before the end of the year that a Racing Bull car will line up ahead of both Red Bull cars. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I fully agree. And I thought it was a really interesting take that came from Alan Permain as Stefano Domenicali walks past me, and he's got files in his hand. He's got papers. That must be important. Anyway, he's smiling, so it can't be that serious. But yes, it was really interesting that Alan Permain, the team principal at Racing Bulls, said not only is the car, dare we call it, easier to drive, but more compliant, or just gives more confidence to the drivers compared to potentially the Red Bull or other cars. but also it's easier to set up for the engineers, or easier for them to get it into the right window and get it responding the way they want. So the two go hand in hand. It's not just the drivers going out on track feeling better with the car they've got. It's taken less work for the team to give them that car. And he said that's why it's more consistently we can do that, and we get these good performances, and that's a design plan, really. That's what you're looking for with this car. It's what the team wanted, was something they could set up consistently at a high level. So he was saying, it's a whole team effort that they're so competitive so often. On that, though, I do want to give a word to Yuki Tsunoda, who dropped out in Q1, and everyone will go, another really tough one for Yuki. But he was just under 2/10, I think. I think it was like 0.18 off Max in Q1. He was really close to him. It's probably one of the smallest margins they've had all year. Now, it is one of the shortest tracks in that sense, but it's not an easy track. And yet, because of how uncompetitive Red Bull were, because Max was only about 12th in that session, that knocked Yuki out. And that's the same thing with when we talk about like Lewis and Charles. If you don't advance, you don't get the chance to then find that lap time or take advantage of changing conditions. And Yuki is going to have a tough afternoon from back there.
Yeah.
Hey, Chris, does anybody in the team call Alan Permain Bat anymore?
So certain members of the media do. Those that have dealt with him for a long time. I mean, I don't on that front.
Right.
But yeah, a few media members do. When I don't know about team members, because of course he's not been there that long, has he? Racing Bulls. He's been at Racing Bulls for just over 18 months, I think. But anyway, the waiting's paid off. Fred Vasseur, Fred, you're always in demand as Ferrari team principal, but it's good to be in demand when you put a car on pole position, isn't it? Does this feel like it's been a bit of a long time coming this year?
Yeah, it was so far, but it's for sure it's from far the best session of the season. But it was a very difficult one, and we have to keep this in mind. And we were not that far away to have the two cars out in Q2 also. And we were able to come back and to put everything together and to do some steps for Q3. But it was a huge challenge for us, but for everybody, I think. And conditions were changing massively from Q1 to Q2 with some drops and a bit more windy at the end, and so that it's and then the window for the tires is so narrow that if you are a bit out, that you are dead, and it's a challenge for sure. That we know that when the conditions are like this, it's very, very tricky to put everything together.
Well, based on that, does it come down to the team and setup changes you might make, or is it all down to the driver responding in real time?
It's a combination, because we need to have also their feeling about if the tires are ready and when they are ready and where they are ready, and we can adjust. But during the session, it's quite difficult also. What we have also to consider is that Q1, Q2, we have to queue massively at the exit of the pit lane, that being on at the entrance of the pit lane. You have to queue at the pit exit. You are losing massively temperature, and it's another challenge. It means that you have to put all these parameters in consideration, and it's completely different compared to the free practice when you start on your own and you go for your lap.
I made the point to the guys in the studio just now that Lewis was just 15 thousandths away from making it to Q3 and then having a chance of doing something much better. But how hard is that going to make his job tomorrow?
It's better to start from pole in Budapest than from P11 for sure, and it will be difficult. But I think the analysis is the good one, that you don't have to compare P1 and P11. You have to compare 1/10 in Q2. It's more the issue, because Charles was not that far away to be out also in Q2. We have to keep this in mind in our analysis of the day. But it is like it is, and for sure that we have to collectively to do a better job to not be exposed Q1 or Q2, and the fact that we had to use a second set in Q1 also was not a good start of the session, because then you have only one set in Q2, and it's much more difficult.
But you do have Charles on pole. You do have a car at the front of the grid here. It is tough to overtake. McLaren are quick, but do you have the car to win this race tomorrow?
Yesterday the pace was good on the long stint. Now we don't know what will be the condition for tomorrow. If it will be with Inter, with slicks, windy, sunny, or whatever, that we'll see tomorrow, and I will try to find the good compromise for this. But so far we are always in a better shape on Sunday than Saturday.
I will look forward to it. Thanks for your time, Fred.
Brilliant, Chris. He sounded awfully calm and reserved, didn't he?
That was loquacious for Fred.
It was, yeah. He was smiling throughout that one, and yeah,
Good.
we've had some where you can tell, can't you, where he just is a bit shorter with the answers or whatever. But and don't forget, I was at the end of the queue there. He'd been doing a lot of talking, and
Right.
quite often I see him roll his eyes. It's never personal when he's told he's got another media thing to do. It's just more that he wants to stop. And on this occasion, not at all. He was told, he's like, "Yep, sure, next one." So it's always easier to do, isn't it, when you put a car on pole?
Spread the news far and wide, particularly to guys like Executive Chairman John Elkann at Ferrari and so on and so forth.
And once again, I have to Google a word that Bob Varsha uses during the show, loquacious.
Abby.
Yeah. Hey, guys, I want to talk. I ran down the top 10. I want to talk about number 11, and particularly P11 for Oliver Bearman, because he has finished the fourth race in a row leading up to this race in 11th, and he finishes qualifying in 11th. So he's in the perfect position to set a Formula One record for the most consecutive finishes in the same position outside of P1 if he finishes 11th in the Grand Prix tomorrow.
I'm sure that's a record he would much rather not set.
You know, and I would love to, I need to get ChatGPT or something on this, because there was such a long streak of Haas finishing 11th. For many years, on and off, they finished 11th, 11th, 11th. I love to see how many times they finished 11th in both Grand Prix and qualifying, because it's happened many times. I've always had the tire choice in qualifying. It's really kind of weird, actually.
I off the top of my head, I've got no idea, I must admit. So it is a quirk, though. I must, that's a very fair point. I'm surprised. So 5 in a row would be the new record for outside, apart from winning. Correct?
Yes, that's right. According to Google.
Now, I know we have a lot of races now, admittedly, so maybe I've got recency bias, but that surprises me that hasn't happened 5 times in a row before. With what are we on? Nearly 1,200 races?
Yeah.
That's
sure.
kind of... And I know reliability used to play a bigger role, but we used to have bigger field spreads where you could almost guarantee the order if everyone got away cleanly. So that's why that surprises me. But I must admit, that's one I'll now keep an eye on as well, John, now you said that. And I'll probably put it to him tomorrow if he does it. And he'll have no idea and he won't care. He'll be annoyed because he's just one place outside the points.
Right. How many?
Well, Chris,
are those all Bearman finishes, or are there other drivers?
Yeah, those are Bearman finishes. Yeah.
Oh.
Chris, I was convinced you had a Neuralink connected because you knew every stat ever, but I'm glad to hear that you didn't know that one. And maybe I got it wrong, or maybe Google got it wrong. All right, guys, let's get our last break in real quick. You're listening to Speed City F1, back after a quick break. All right, still live on YouTube. Yeah, I want to confirm that, but that's what Google says about Oliver Bearman. TW says it could be a very exciting start to the race.
Oh, yeah.
Not like 2021.
Yeah.
Well, it could also be a very exciting start to the race if we do get the forecast wet weather at the start of the day, because it looks like it's likely to continue kind of up to race start, but then the chances reduce. And similar, I guess, to what we had in Spa, but it could mean again that we have a wet race, and this is a track where they're more likely to do a grid start and let them loose because the speeds are lower and visibility is easier. There'll be less spray because your average speed is lower, so you're not kicking up so much spray, and it really kind of snowballs. So yeah, I reckon we could actually get a wet start and a wet first part of the race that could really spice things up.
Yeah. Hey, Chris, talk about the rain today. They're talking about just a few drizzle, sprinkles. What happened exactly?
Yeah, it was an interesting one. On the radar, we saw it. There was a couple of thunderstorms over the city, which, you're talking about maybe 15 miles away, 20 miles away. And they were moving kind of north, so not coming to the circuit. And it never looked like that was going to hit. But then suddenly, just had this like rain shower, this cloud of quite heavy rain just appear over the circuit. Like watching the radar, it just popped up. And it grew, but as it did so, it was just moving north as well, and it hadn't really started raining by the time it became something bigger, and it had just gone north of us and just missed us. So there were a few drops at different times, but nothing that really it impacted things too much. I think for the drivers, it can just be off-putting because you get rain on your visor and you think, oh, that might affect the grip levels, even though it's warm enough that the track is just evaporating it straight away. But it makes you that tiny bit more tentative, and if you're tentative, then you don't put the heat in the tire so much. Then you lose a bit of performance, and it can snowball there as well.
You get cautious.
Yep. All right, here we go. Come back.
Hi, this is Max Verstappen, and you're listening to Speed City.
Welcome back to the fastest hour in radio, Speed City.
Thank you, Max. We appreciate it. I'm going to run down the rest of the grid today because we got through 11th with Oliver Behrman and his crazy stat, then followed by Hamilton, Sainz, Colapinto, Antonelli in 15th, Tsunoda, Gasly, Ocon, Hulkenberg, and Albon. And, let's talk about Sainz and Albon, Chris, because Williams had some trepidation coming into this weekend, didn't they? They didn't have high expectations, I think.
Not particularly, but Albon was saying after Spa that he felt if they got everything together at any circuit, they can score points. If they had a trouble-free weekend and they set the car up right, that they were good enough to score points everywhere. And then, I don't know, I don't feel like they haven't set the car up well here. I just feel like looking at the way both have performed, as you say, that they've just not been competitive enough. So it doesn't quite tally with what his expectations had been, wider expectations. He wasn't just talking about this race, but he was talking about every track. So that's a slight surprise, but you could call it before qualifying that they were going to struggle. I was surprised it was Albon who was lowest, if that makes sense. He's used to an uncompetitive Williams from previous years as well, and we've seen Carlos struggle a bit more compared to him this year, I think because he's getting used to that car. So for Carlos to out-qualify him so clearly was quite a surprise on that front from my end. But yeah, I'd be surprised to see points for Williams. I really do think that they just don't have a competitive enough car here compared to some of the other races that we've been at. And as you've mentioned already on the show, you look at an Aston Martin, for example, there's two cars that have bumped them down comfortably away from the points. Haas as well in the mix there, both Racing Bulls in the mix. I just can't see it for Williams tomorrow.
Yeah. And looking at some of the other names in the bottom half of that list that I was just talking about, I mean, it's striking that Hulkenberg in 19th. Well, yeah, but yeah, Hulkenberg 19th, Bortoletto in 7th. Bob, do you know what happened to Hulkenberg?
No, I don't. But, I've said it before. He's had such a roller coaster of a season. He'll qualify top 10, then he'll qualify at the back and do this time and again. And the race results similarly. So I don't know what the problem is that he might have had. Remember, he wasn't in the car on Friday first practice. They put Paul Aaron, their young Estonian up-and-comer, in the car for free practice one. So whether it was a lack of practice time or what, it's hard to say. But when you've got Ocon, who is a former winner of this race, remember, Hulkenberg and Albon, that's a whole lot of experience to see in places 18, 19, and 20.
Yeah, really good.
Pierre Gasly too, a race winner down there in the bottom five, and kudos to Franco Colapinto out qualifying Gasly and getting through to Q2 today. It was a few. I think I say it a lot, but we do talk about how competitive this is. The margins are generally so small that it doesn't take a lot to knock you out when you thought you'd have been more competitive. But that takes me to conversely with Sauber, that was what surprised me so much. Hulkenberg in that session in Q1 when he got knocked out was best part of half a second off Bortoletto. He was nowhere. So he clearly didn't have the tyres in the window or the car setup that he wanted. That was a proper tale of two halves there, where it's not just ruining a little bit of misfortune, but more trying to work out where that went wrong for one side of the garage.
Yeah. Hey, we had a name in that list that I just talked about. It was Carlos Sainz. And Chris, you got to catch up with him. I clipped out a little 1-minute section of this interview you did with Carlos Sainz. It's really awesome that you got to sit down with him for so long. But, first of all, this clip is about his hopes coming into Williams after leaving Ferrari. But tell us how you ended up getting that interview and where you guys were.
Yeah, I mean, it was it took a lot, I must admit. So what I did was I sent an email to Williams and said I'd like to talk to him, and I got an email back from Williams, and they said yes. Essentially, that is how it goes with these. You just sometimes just got to wait it out. You put the request in, you have to wait a long time for it to come to fruition sometimes. So the Williams request actually for both drivers came in around the Spanish Grand Prix weekend, I'll admit. So I wanted to speak to Carlos, maybe a little bit later than Alex, but I wanted Alex off the back of Spain heading into Canada. I got Alex in Canada. People may remember we had some clips from him then. But it was just, you get a bit of back and forth. And Williams said, hey, right, we've got a bit of time in Hungary. We can do it there. As a number of teams did, actually. We spoke to a lot of people this weekend already. But we were hiding away in one of the meeting rooms that Williams has on the first floor of their motorhome, so away from where most people get to walk into. But the room was full of merchandise ready to be signed, full of it. So there was not a lot of space at all. But the fact that we are an audio-only platform really helps, because we didn't need to set up for a camera. We didn't need to make it look pretty. So like, right, you guys can hide in here. And he spent most of the time trying to work out where to put his hand so he wasn't going to touch anything that he shouldn't be touching or moving, and not knocking over the coffee that I'd been given because it was perching precariously on the corner of a table.
My hopes were that Williams would be a solid midfield car in 25 that allowed me to fight for points and not be at the back end of the grid, just somewhere around the top 10 that I could still have fun playing around for points, which might sound stupid, but it's still better than, and it's a lot more something to go for than fighting for P16, P17, where 24 races like that can get for sure frustrating for a driver. And then the other hopes were still to be seen, which is 26, 27, 28. What can Williams get to? And my feeling and my hope is that we can be championship contenders in the late part of the years that I just mentioned.
Yeah. That to me is what is, I wouldn't doubt if they do have success because of what they've put together. But to me, that was just what struck me, Chris, that he has these high hopes for when the new rules kick in.
Yeah, and it's the journey that Williams are on. Everyone keeps talking about, but so far the proof has been in the pudding, isn't it? Like the step from last year to this year has been pretty damn big, and that team should, and I'll say should because it's never a guarantee, but should finish fifth. It should have enough points already in the bag, but also be able to pick up enough to keep anyone else at bay. Although we've seen the likes of Sauber closing in a little bit in recent weeks with their upgrades, but that is a big step forward. And not only that, they'll have done that while at the same time kind of writing this year off, like a lot of teams had. But because of where Williams were, they could have almost afforded to do that earlier. 2 years ago, or a year ago, scrapping much further down the grid, they can kind of go, okay, we're not going to get very far forward in this era, but once we hit 26, that's our time. So they've been building to that for a long time, investing heavily. And there's a lot that Carlos said in that interview where he's kind of saying, yes, I'm seeing everything that I was hoping to see and expecting to see. And if anything, it's exceeding my expectations. We're further ahead than I thought we'd be right now. And all the other work going on is going in the direction I was hoping for too.
Yeah. All right, guys, let's talk a little bit about tomorrow, because we had all our YouTube followers are jumping on talking about Kevin Kelly, talking about the track made for smaller cars. Could be a DRS train, and qualifying is so strong here. I mean, we this, the drivers talk about what this track being Monaco without walls, right? And Bob, I'll start with you. I mean, what do you think? I mean, is Leclerc in a really strong position because he's at the front of what could be a train like that?
I wouldn't say his position is really strong. I mean, we've talked about how close everything is and how surprised we were that Leclerc was able to eke out that pole position. If he gets a great start and turn one is an absolutely dead man's land in Formula One, you just never know who's going to grab the initiative or think they've got the initiative, and then you wind up with a big steaming pile of 6 cars outside turn 1. We've seen that before. But, if he gets turns 1 and 2 done properly, once you're in position, you're hard to pass, no question about it. So if the Ferrari has the legs on the McLaren, which is asking a lot, and Charles Leclerc gets a great start, I think Ferrari can do really well in this race. I expect at this point, maybe McLaren is watching their points total more than they are talking about race wins. I could be totally wrong about that. They may get more aggressive now, but typically when you have this kind of a lead in the Constructors' Championship, you're not going to take that extra inch. You're not going to be quite as aggressive. You want to preserve your positions, score big points, and carry on.
Yeah, and that lead you're talking about is that Ferrari has 48% of the points that McLaren has. So that's a massive lead. Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, I wouldn't rule out a fun one tomorrow. Like I said about the weather that we might have involved as well. And as today showed, the conditions are kind of there for just rain to bubble up, even if we're not expecting it, because it's quite hot and humid and there's a risk of thunderstorms. But also, this track, strangely, has gone from one that used to be really dull for racing, really boring, really hard to see overtaking, to one that's actually provided some pretty exciting races in recent years. And I think it's partly high degradation. So even when it's hard to overtake, you're then creating that offset in tyre performance. So I think we're going to have a fun one. I think Leclerc does have a good chance, but I'm with Bob. He's got to lead out of turn one. He's got to hold on to that lead, because then obviously there's a dynamic between the two McLaren guys who are trying to outscore each other and probably racing each other a bit harder than thinking of the overall win, as he says. So that will also open that door.
I'm with you. I think that what we could see some of what KK was talking about, but I think that this could be super exciting. And Bob, who was it? Grosjean that one year who created one of those giant steaming piles? I think so.
Well, there were a lot of hands in the air on that one. No, Grosjean had the big one at Spa.
He did. Okay. You're thinking of Valtteri, I think. John, Bottas went bowling at one point, where only a small mistake in the wet, but once you've poked someone deep at turn one, you wipe out a load of cars.
Right.
All right.
That was the
one.
All
right, guys. Well, we are just about out of time. We're going to stick to our normal start times. I say normal this time of year. So tomorrow morning, we'll get started at 8 a.m. Eastern time for our pre-race show, and then followed by the race. And then immediately after the race, our 1 hour post-race show. So thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Thanks to Bob Varsha, Chris Medland, Casey back in the studio, and everybody tuning in. And we'll talk to you tomorrow morning.